Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi, my name is Sangidalis Desaktirani, and today I'm here with Miss Marianti Flavia, a freelancer English teacher. Hello, Miss Marianti. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Thanks for joining today. Let me start by introducing Miss Marianti. She is an English education graduate from Yogyakarta State University and used to teach a state junior high school 5, Yogyakarta, and Kesatuan Bangsa boarding school. Currently, she is working as an English mentor at Remote Worker Indonesia. Miss Marianti, could you tell us a little about how you started your career as an English teacher?
Yes, of course. First of all, I graduated from Yogyakarta State University English Education Department, and I started teaching freelance when I was still at uni. It was in 2007. I used to be teaching at junior high school, state junior high school 5, Yogyakarta, and senior high school 8, Yogyakarta. Oh, it was the first one. It was 5 and 8, and also Kesatuan Bangsa Boarding School, Yogyakarta. And I also used to be teaching Dharma Siswa students. Dharma Siswa students or those international students learning Bahasa Indonesia and also Indonesian cultures here. So it wasn't teaching English there, it was teaching them Bahasa Indonesia instead. And now I am an English mentor at RWID, Remote Worker Indonesia. So I am helping with our friends at RWID are about to work with foreign clients, and they will need to be able to communicate in English, and that's what I do. I help them with their English. So we have this regular practice. It's more into using it as communications, and I find it really interesting and also challenging. I mean, like, it's nice that we are using English as communications like this in RWID. Like, we are more into, we learn English to communicate, something like that. And yeah, I do believe that it's really important for us to be able to communicate in English, and it's also really important for me to be able to help our fellow friends at RWID to be able to communicate in English, because it does broaden our chances to be able to communicate and in English. And of course, at the end of the day, it's going to help us all to find clients overseas. Right.
Okay, thanks, Miss Marianti, for sharing your story. And now, first question. Let's talk about English teaching in Indonesia. What do you think about the development of English teaching in Indonesia?
Oh, that's the development of English teaching in Indonesia. In my humble opinion, it's now, it has been shifted a lot. Like back in the day, the teaching of English was more into, taking tests. Like, English was taught to help students to pass the test, to answer questions. So it wasn't taught to help students communicate in English. Like, it was more into for our children at school to be able to answer the question test, the national test. Yes, I mean those kind of things. But today, the teaching of English is more into communications. Like, sorry, we are helping our children to really use English to communicate. Back in the day, it was more into the passive English, the written and reading skills. But today, passive English are still important. Passive English is still important, but we have this additional, the reading and listening and speaking skills are also playing a really important place in today's English language teaching in Indonesia. So, because it's probably the shift of globalization as well. I'm like, everything is developing. And so we are more into preparing our students to be able to communicate with global citizens. So it's not only about the written skills, the passive English, reading and writing, answering tests, paper tests, and something like that. But today it's more into using English as a means of communications. Listening and speaking are now playing a really important place in English language teaching. So the passive English is important, but the active English is also very important today. Like back in the day, it was more into the passive English. Right.
Yes. Okay. That's a great point, Miss Marianti. And the second questions. Uh, what do you think are the biggest challenges students face when learning English, and how can we overcome them?
The challenges in English language teaching. Right. The challenges. That today we are living in 2025. It's been a different era from back in the day. When we were more into the passive English, the reading and writing skills. Today we are more into communications. We are teaching English as a means of communications to really listen and speak, something like that. But the fact is that the challenges we face, not all of us are ready to this shift. It's like curriculum. Every time curriculum changes, educators, teachers, they need to adjust. And the thing is that sometimes, not sometimes, we have so many teachers here, right? Like the previous generations and the today's generations. This kind of shift, it's probably not a very challenge. It's probably something natural for today's teachers' generations, right? They're probably more into teaching English as a means of communications anyway. But for the previous generations who have been more into teaching English as, to pass the test, to take exam, something like that. It's a challenge, they've been teaching English to this kind of paper-based test 4 years, and it's not that easy to suddenly change. That's probably the challenge in the English language teaching. It's in my humble perspective. Right. Next, please.
Okay, absolutely, Miss Marianti. And so the third questions. How how do you think about the development of foreign language learning, especially in English, especially English in Indonesia?
Right. Now about the development of English learning in Indonesia. I think in my humble opinion, it's actually almost the same with the development of English teaching in Indonesia. Back in the day, we students, like when I was still a kid at school, we were taught to learn English. We were taught English to take tests, like to paper-based tests, to answer questions, and to be able to get high grade, high score at national exam or daily life, test, something like that. Like it was more into vocabularies, reading, being able to answer grammar questions and something like that. But today, now that it's more into communications, like the challenges are, quite varied. I mean, like it's it somehow in my observations in my perspective, like somehow where we live does matter. It really depends on where we live. If you live in a big city, let's say, you're going to have quite a lot of resources, right? You will have so many offline communities to hang out with, and at the same time, you're going to be able to learn English with them. Like, this is actually a community created to practice in English. Like, those people who they love English and they want to communicate with other students. Like, they would actually create this kind of offline communities to practice in English, to meet and talk in English. And like that's pretty normal in big cities, but it's going to be another story in rural areas. If you live in a rural area, it's pretty difficult to find that kind of community. Like, most of the time you will not have it. So that's a big challenge. Like, the challenge is that like we don't have the resources. We as learners, we don't have enough resources sometimes, especially if we live in a rural area. And also, if you are living in a big city, except for the communities, you will have more resources, infrastructures. It's pretty easy, and it's pretty impossible for you to find actually native speakers as your teachers. Like in big cities, there are so many courses with native speakers as actually the instructors, and it's going to help a lot in our English learning progress development. And when we're in rural areas, that's probably going to be almost impossible. Like, I mean, no foreign or native speakers will live in rural area, most of them. If they do live in rural areas, they're not going to be teaching English. They're probably doing their business or something else. And so it's probably difficult for us who live in rural area to actually have a real contact with native speakers to practice English with. And that's the second. And the third one is also just the international schools. Like when you live in a big city, you will have so many options of international schools. When you're living in a rural area, that's going to be another story. You might have international school, but it's not going to be a lot. And probably the quality is probably a bit different as well, because in big cities you have so many international schools you can pick from, and most of the time the teachers, the instructors are very I mean, like, there are so many people in big cities, and like for example, like what I said before, there are so many natives in big cities, and it's really possible that if you were in a big city, you live in a big city, you're going to attend international schools, and the teachers are actually native speakers. That's really possible. But in rural areas, we might have international schools, but international is probably not exactly the same as what we have in big cities, like, you know, the lack of resources, the lack of teachers, something like that. Yeah, that's what I've been observing with this kind of English, the development of English learning in Indonesia. And also, it's like the motivation is also really important. Like, you know, when you live in a big city, you might be more motivated. How so? Because like most of your friends are probably speaking English. Like, a lot of your friends are attending international schools, taking English courses with native speakers as their instructors. And it's like, you know, the pressures from the peers, from the environment is going to force you to, wow, they are speaking English really well, and I need to be able to speak English as well. So I will not look, you know, good as well. Like, because, you know, when you are hanging out together and you're not the same, you were probably going to feel less, and probably that matters a lot. And when you live in a big city, you are going to have probably not exactly a broader view, but, you know, English is probably something very useful for you, you know, for us who live in big cities. Like, it's like what I said, it's pretty easy to find communities. Like, you know, you want to hang out with people, so you want to, like, you know, you want to be able to be sitting with them and to be discussing things with them, and they're discussing things in English, and so you will want to discuss things in English. But when we live in a rural area, since we don't have the community anyway, it's very hard to how do you call that, to actually find the motivations. Like, a lot of us in the rural area do think that English is not that very important. Like, I can still live without English. Why do I have to learn English? I just need to pass the test, and that's it. So the lack of resources, infrastructures, and the biggest challenge is the lack of motivations when we live in a rural area. Like, yeah. So that's the big challenge. Like, you know, the motivation is not there. In rural area, most of the time, motivation is not there, and the teachers are probably not so into teaching English as a active English, like for a means of communications. Like, sometimes at the end of the day, in real practice, like teaching of English is still more into answering questions, taking tests, something like that. Especially, like, you know, it was in rural areas and big cities, and it's going to be also something else when we are attending international schools and public schools. With this kind of shift in focus of English language teaching, like today we're more into using English for communications, but in practice, in reality, the teaching of English and learning of English at a public school is still more into answering questions. But I do hope that it's going to change one day. You know, at the end of the day, we will need to be able to speak in English, like whether you live in big cities or rural areas, or you're attending international schools or public schools. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And then the fourth questions, what role do you think teachers play in in helping students overcome these challenges and improve their English?
Yeah, right. What can we teachers do to help this, to cope with, to help the situations? I think what teachers can do, first of all, I mean, if you are teachers in big cities, or if you are a teacher who is already into teaching English as a means of communications, I think it's really important for us teachers to motivate, to help our children find their strongest why. That's really important. And because, like, even if you live in a big city and you don't have the motivations, it's, I mean, like, yeah, when we have so many resources, so many international schools, so many native speakers around, but if we don't have the motivations, we're not going to learn anyway. But on the contrary, if we have the motivations, even if we live in a rural area, we are going to find a way, you know. The lack of resources, the lack of teachers, the lack of native speakers, they're not going to be a problem. There will be a problem, that there will be some problems, but when you are motivated, when you have your strongest why, your strong why, you are going to find a way. So I think it's really important for us teachers, English teachers, to help our children to find their strongest why. Why do we need to learn English? I mean, like, it's not only to take the test. Like, I think it's really important for us teachers to really highlight that learning English from, if we are from, let's talk about public school. In public school, normally we are going to learn English when we are in junior high school and senior high school, at least it's back in the day. So we need to highlight to our children that learning English is not only just to answer questions, to take a test. It's going to be a waste of time and energy if you're learning English from junior high school, senior high school, and sometimes at university, the first or the early semesters at uni, the first year at uni, we will still need to learn English. But once we finish everything, we're not able to communicate. That's a shame. I mean, that's a waste of time and energy. So I think it's really important for us to help to tell and to make sure that we're on the same page. Like, let's learn English as a means of communications. You might want to travel around the world, and you will need English to do that. Like, who doesn't want to see the world, right? You might want to work with clients from around the globe, and you will at least need English for that, because Mandarin is also going to be good, but so far the language most spoken is not most spoken. The language most spoken is Mandarin, but spoken by Chinese. But, like, you know, if we are talking about international language, it's still English. So it's going to be really helpful if we want to work with foreign clients, or if we want to work in another country. Like, you know, as long as you have English, that's going to be fine. Like, you don't have to speak Mandarin. You don't have to speak every single language in the world. You really need to at least speak English, and you can work any way you want, actually. So at least traveling, like, you know, you'll need English to travel. So please learn English to communicate, not just to take the test. That's going to be waste of everything. Yeah. And so that's the motivations. And after that, I think we teachers, we need to also engage our students to be more involved. Like, you know, we can perhaps use like games, we can use technology, I mean, whatever it is to make our students interested. I think that's a really important something that we can do to help our children learn English better, you know, something like that.
Yeah, that's so true. A supportive and engaging environment makes all the difference. And lastly, for students who might be struggling with their English learning journey, Do you have any advice for them?
Oh, right. So what about I have any something that I want to say to uh, our fellow friends learning English? I think at yeah, that's the first thing is you will need to find your strongest why, your strong why you need to learn English. It's going to be a lot better if you love it. But if you don't love it, at least you know your strongest why you need to learn English. Once you find your strongest why you find the motivation, you will face everything. You will find a way, no matter what. Yeah, you will always find a way when you like it, when you need it, something like that. You find your strong why. And the second one is do something that you like. Like, English is a language, and with language, we can learn from everything. We can read, we can listen to music, we can watch movies, do what you like. Because it's really important when we are learning, it's really easy for us to burn out, right? And we need to find a way that is suitable for us, that we enjoy. So we are going to get something in return as well. It's not only about learning. We enjoy the whole process. That's really important. So we're not going to feel burned out that easily, and yeah. First, find your motivation. Second is do what you like in the learning process. And the third one is set some duration. Make it short, but persistent. Like, it's got to be consistent as well. I don't suggest you to learn English, like, let's say, an hour a day or 2 hours a day. Like, you are so into it that, okay, I need to learn English. I need to, yeah. You said actually 2 hours a day, an hour a day. At first, it's probably going to be possible, but by the end of the month, or perhaps 2 months at most, it's really likely that we are going to feel burnout. And when we are burned out, we are running out of energy and motivation and effort, and we're going to simply stop. And that's something we don't want. I think 10 minutes a day is enough. Set a timer, 10 minutes, and that's it. You are tired or not, stop. But start again tomorrow. 10 minutes, stop. Continue the next day. 10 minutes, stop. It's always like that. So you're going to get bored. You're going to feel burned out. And you will have this sense of, like, oh, I need to learn this. Like, it's only 10 minutes a day. It's something really easy. The psychological something is really important, in my opinion. So that's the third. And the last one is, be persistent. Don't give up that easily. It's like, that's why I suggest you 10 minutes a day. It's like, because an hour a day or 2 hours a day is really, it's going to be easy to start, but to be consistent, that's going to be another story. Right, that's what I think. I suggest, like, find your strongest why and do what you like. So you're going to also enjoy the whole process. Third is set some duration, not too long. It's really important to make sure we're not, burn out. And the fourth, be consistent. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Miss Marianti, for all your valuable advice today. I'm sure your advice will really help many people on their English learning journey. It was a pleasure talking with you.
Right. That's it's really. I'm also really happy to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me, Mas Desak. I do hope that it's going to be helpful for us all to both teach and also learn English in our English learning journey. You know, thank you very much for inviting me. It's really nice to discuss these things with you, Master Sak. Right. Thank you. Okay, bye.
Thank you. Okay,
Assalamualaikum
bye.
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, my name is Sangidelis Desaktirani, and now I will present my English final exam. Okay, I meet Miss Marianti to share about to share about her experience about English education. So, uh, now is Miss Marianti's background. She she is graduated in English education from Yogyakarta State University, and her teaching experience, she taught at State Junior High School 5 Yogyakarta, and then Senior High School 8 Yogyakarta, and Kesatuan Bangsa Boarding School. And currently, she is an English teacher at Remote Worker Indonesia, and she help members communicate with international clients. Okay, so uh, the first question is about English teaching development in Indonesia. So, Ms. Marianti answers that English teaching has changed a lot. In the past, the focus was mainly on passing tests, and now the focus is on communication and helping students use English in real life. Then the globalization has pushed this shift toward communication skills like speaking, listening, and writing. And the aim is to prepare students to communicate with people around the world, not just for exams. Okay, and the second questions is about the challenges in learning English. So, uh, my question is, what do you think are the biggest challenges students face when learning English, and how can we overcome them? And Miss Marianti answers, the biggest challenge is the shift from teaching English for test uh, from teaching English for tests to teaching it as a communication tool. And then not all teachers are ready for this change, especially the older generation. Okay, so the solution is teachers need to adjust their methods to focus on communication, not just for exams. And then motivation is a key, and students need to understand that English is for real world use, not just passing tests. And then the third question is about foreign language learning in Indonesia. Okay, my question is, how do you think about the development of foreign language learning, especially English, in Indonesia? And then Miss Marianti answers, English learning has changed similarly to teaching. In the past, it was focused on grammar and passing tests, and now it's more about communication. Nah, the challenges are uh, about the areas, urban areas and rural areas. Nah, in big cities or urban areas, there are many resources and communities to practice English. and they have higher motivation due to exposure to English speakers and international schools. In rural areas, it's harder to find resources, native speakers, and English practice communities. Yeah, in rural areas, also limited resources, also uh, have have limited resources and fewer opportunities to practice English, and they have lower motivation due to less exposure to English in daily life. And then students in big cities are more more are more motivated because they are surrounded by English speakers and international schools. In rural areas, there's less motivation and fewer resources, which makes it harder for students to learn. Okay, next, the role. Uh, this is my fourth question about the role of teachers in overcoming challenges. Okay, the teachers must help students find their strongest why, the reason they want to learn English, and then the motivation. Even if there are many resources, if students are not motivated, they won't learn. And then teachers should make sure students understand that learning English is for communication, not just for passing tests. And teachers should also use interactive methods like games and technology to keep students engaged. And the fifth and last question is about the advice for students struggling with English. Okay, my question is, do you have any advice for students who might be struggling with their English learning journey? And Miss Marianti answers, first is find your strongest why. That understand why you need to learn English. Motivation is a key. And the second is do what you enjoy or enjoy the learning. Learn through activities you like watching movies or listening to music. This will make more fun. And the third is uh, consistent study. So set short, consistent study sessions, starting with just 10 minutes a day. It's better to study consistently than to study for hours and then burn out. And the last is be persistent. Don't give up easily. Consistency is more important than studying for long period. Okay? Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.